Brazil is the spiritual home of the beautiful game, and it's hard to believe that only 125 years ago, football was unknown here. The first Brazilian Football Confederation was founded in 1914. However, we do have evidence telling us that football was being played in Brazil nearly 20 years before that. But the big question is, who brought football to Brazil? Charles Miller, the son of a Scottish railway engineer, is often named the father of Brazilian football. But some others credit a working class boy from Busby, Thomas Donohoe.
I'm convinced that Tom Donohoe was the man who brought football to Brazil.
To recognise Thomas Donohoe's accomplishments, the people of Bangu are erecting a statue of him in the centre of town next to the factory where he used to work.
Thomas Donohoe largely is unknown even today, but from our perspective, he seems to be quite an important figure within Rio de Janeiro and the early development of football there.
Until now, what we knew about our history, our football, was that Charles Miller was the precursor of the sport here in Brazil. Brazilians doesn't know anything about Thomas Donohoe.
Growing up in Busby in the late 1800s, Thomas Donohoe didn't have the most affluent start.
He would leave school at the age of about 11, not more than 11, and he became a labourer in the print works.
The interesting thing about looking at the development of football in Brazil and Scotland's links to it is actually developed through industry and through employment. There wasn't professional footballers going over to Brazil in the early to mid 1890s. It was ordinary workers.
Thomas Donohoe was one of these workers sailing from Southampton to Rio at the age of 21.
He arrives in 1894, a few weeks later in Rio de Janeiro. And what's interesting from our perspective in terms of Tom Donohoe is that he seems to have been the first person in that part of Brazil to have started to play football.
He would be desperate to play. So there was spare ground at the side of the factory, which later became the football pitch, the original football pitch of Bangu.
Thomas Donohoe didn't register their matches, in fact, but since he was professional in his hometown, it would be impossible to stay here for like a year without playing football.
Now, it would not have been 11-a-side. It's like when I was young, you put down 2 jackets in a spare ground and you enjoyed yourselves, as we all did as young men.
We believe that he played quite before Charles Miller.
Whether Donohoe was playing 11-a-side or not, for me that doesn't matter. He's playing football in Rio de Janeiro, in the district of Rio de Janeiro, at a very early time.
It was in 1904, that's 10 years after Thomas Donohoe arrived in Bangu, that he helped set up the Bangu Athletics Club, and it's here that he made his second contribution to Brazilian football.
O Bangu é especial, como por exemplo, o primeiro negro a jogar futebol no Brasil foi no Bangu.
So for Bangu Athletic, within a year of formation, to be bringing black Brazilians into the ranks shows you that they were a very inclusive club at a time when other early clubs in and around Brazil were quite exclusive. Certainly black Brazilians weren't permitted into the ranks, weren't encouraged to play football.
It wouldn't have worried Tom. Scots were open to these things. He would have had no hesitation if a man was black or brown or yellow or green, and if he could play good football, Tom would have said, he's for me, he's in the team.
So for me, that's the big story there. But certainly he has a pioneer, having arrived in 1894.
Ele foi o verdadeiro pai do futebol. E agora, com a inauguração do monumento ao pioneirismo do futebol, ao escocês, isso vai dar mais visibilidade ao nosso bairro, né? Vai trazer muita mídia positiva. Então foi um escocês que trouxe tudo de bom para o nosso bairro e com certeza também para toda a Escócia, que está num processo de emancipação do Reino Unido. Então é bom para as duas partes, nós temos que abraçar isso, dar veracidade.
Whether you believe it was Charles Miller or Thomas Donohoe who brought football to Brazil, one thing we do know is that it was Thomas Donohoe who opened up the game for players like Pelé, Garrincha and Ronaldo, and for that we can be thankful.